Greetings. So lately, last week or so, there's been a very strong claim that the famous 2004 Tic Tac UFO or UAP encountered by the U.S. Navy is actually man-made, specifically Lockheed Martin technology. That claim comes from Ross Coulthart. Ross is a journalist that I respect and know personally. But I do want to take a closer look at that claim. Ross said this in a recent interview on a podcast with Bryce Zabel, and he said, without qualification, he said, I now know categorically that the Tic Tac is Lockheed Martin technology. Now, he didn't provide any supporting documentation or evidence explaining how or why he reached that conclusion. It's a very firm claim, but so far it's been made without any accompanying technical details or corroboration. And we understand the need to protect one's sources. That's totally fair. But there are some issues here. So in this video, I'm going to walk through a number of, let's say, documented UAP cases that we can say are Tic Tac-like objects. Some of them are dead ringers for Tic Tacs. Not going back simply to the 1990s or 1980s, but many decades earlier. And also, I just want to raise the issue, if we do assume that the Tic Tac is ours, that is man-made, then we've got some serious questions to answer here. How is it deployed? Who authorized it? How could it breach encrypted military communications? How is it able to track aircraft in real time? Who authorized its incursion during U.S. military exercises? And there's more. I'm not saying this is impossible, but if it is Lockheed Martin, I'm not saying this is a slam dunk. And frankly, there are certain things that do not add up in my view. So now, when we go through these earlier UFO cases, some of them seem very, very close to the Tic Tac. Some, it's hard to know because not all witnesses are very precise in their language when they describe something that's like a cigar-shaped or elongated. You can't always really know. There's some interpretive boundaries here. But all of the objects that we will look at share the same core design. So they're all elongated, smooth-bodied craft with no wings or visible control surfaces, what we would call the classic Tic Tac or cigar shape, again with variations. Some are described as having windows, very interesting, or things resembling windows, and others are completely featureless. Again, some are a little more stretched, some are a little more bunched together. But there's one feature of the 2004 Tic Tac that we don't really see in these older cases, and that's the presence of these small little protrusions or appendages. That's probably one of the main reasons some people will lean toward the man-made hypothesis. It just makes the craft feel just a little less exotic. But is that really the right conclusion? By the way, these were not seen by Commander David Fravor, who's the main pilot of the visual encounter. They were first described by Chad Underwood. He was the WISO, the weapons systems officer, who filmed what is now the very famous FLIR 1 video of the Tic Tac. And he gave an interview back in 2019 where he said he observed these small antenna-like protrusions on the underside of the craft. He said they were not visible in the footage that we've seen, but they were apparently clear on his cockpit sensor display at the time. And he emphasized these things looked like they didn't belong on such a smooth, wingless craft. They were not aerodynamic. They didn't make sense. So what were they? I'm no expert on this at all, but what people who seem like or talk like they're experts say, there's a couple of different possibilities. One is that they're sensors or probes of some sort, like some advanced sensory equipment for ISR. That's intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance. They could collect environmental data maybe, or scan electromagnetic or acoustic signals, or even maybe track telemetry in real time. If the craft was observing military activity, maybe it would provide some kind of multi-spectrum awareness well beyond conventional sensors. That's one theory. Another is propulsion control nodes, so they would help stabilize or steer the craft if it used some kind of exotic propulsion like field-based or inertial systems. Instead of fins or jets, they would give off directional forces or somehow manage the balance during extreme maneuvers. Another is energy emitters, or one person described them as coupling points. So these might channel or regulate energy fields used for propulsion or shielding. If the craft uses field propulsion or some kind of directed energy system, maybe these are like focal points for emission or some kind of interaction. And then finally, some have suggested that the whole idea of an appendage is probably not true, is a sensor anomaly or reflection or some kind of image processing artifact. Although Underwood seemed very confident that they were real and physically part of the craft. So I'll try to be as clear about this as I'm able to be. So if those appendages are real, then someone put them there for a reason. So we will ask, could this have been something that we made? Can electrogravitics explain this? The idea of electrogravitics goes back to T. Townsend Brown in the 1950s or even earlier, using high voltage capacitors to manipulate gravity or inertia. There's a lot of people who believe that this technology went black many decades ago. Maybe it did. Maybe used in projects, maybe like the rumored alien reproduction vehicle, the ARV, if you credit that. I've been open to that possibility for a long time. But the problem is, what we saw the Tic Tac do, that is instant acceleration, seamless control, no heat, no sound, transmedium movement. As far as what we have ever seen electrogravitics do, this goes beyond this. This is not just propulsion. We're talking some level of space-time level engineering. Now, if someone cracked that, okay, fair enough. You have to ask, why test it like this in front of Navy pilots with no coordination, no debrief? Why infiltrate a secure cap point transmitted over encrypted comms? Like, who authorized that? If that was Lockheed Martin acting alone, that's insane. If the Navy was involved, you want to ask, who signed off on that? This is why the whole explanation of it's just advanced tech doesn't really resolve anything, because if it is ours, we're looking, first of all, at a civilizational leap, and one that's being hidden in plain sight with no accountability. And maybe that is the case. I'm not saying this cannot be human, but if you're going to say that, let's show your homework, because right now that story that we did it is just about as extraordinary as the alien one, but which has very little, frankly, to support in terms of any evidence that we've been able to amass over these years. Now, I'm going to come back to this. I'm not done with this theme, but let's rewind the clock a little bit and look at some earlier cases that may also describe Tic Tac-like craft. First one I'm going to show you is from 1936. It's a good one. There are even earlier possibilities, although the data is a little too thin to be sure on some of those. But the basic design, smooth, elongated, rounded, I think does go back further than 1936. But let's just look at this one first. So number of years ago, about 20 years ago, I was visiting the Canadian National Archives in Ottawa, and I came across several extraordinary reports. These are sightings submitted by ordinary people to their government back in those days in the hope that someone might take notice. In truth, the Canadian government did nothing with these reports. They just sat there, but they were preserved, and today you can go back and read them. And a few events describe events going way, way far back. So this is probably my favorite report that I found there while I was looking. This was submitted in the early 1980s by an elderly man. He described his experience in the Northwest Territories in 1936. Now, if you're Canadian, you know this. It's a vast, remote region about the size of Alaska, very sparsely populated even today. He was at a specific place that it's indicated there called Islamer Lake. It's especially isolated. This is deep within a tundra area. It's known as the Barren Grounds. People do not live up there. Trees don't grow there. No one lives there. So at the time, this man was 25 years old. He was working for the Canadian government on aerial mapping operations. He had a pontoon aircraft. This is a cool job. So this is an image. By the way, these are all the images that I will show you are artificially created. I did my very best to make sure these were accurate. I think this is an accurate representation of what actually happened. So he just says, In trying to describe this vehicle, I can only say that it was the most magnificent configuration of an airship one could imagine. I would say it was very large, but this would depend on the height, which, as stated, could not be determined. He had a very long discourse on like the absolute perfect weather. He says not a cloud in the sky, crystal clear, and he was doing some pre-flight checks on his craft. And he just happened to look up and he saw an object that looks very much like what you see here. He describes it as light aluminum color, but no reflection. He was very explicit about this. It was an elliptical shape, slightly elliptical. No portholes. It was stationary. He just looked up. It was just not moving there at first. And then he watched it rotate like this. And it took off at an amazing speed. No contrail, nothing like that. He even attached his service record originally to the document. That was not available to me when I found it in the archives, unfortunately. But he just stated from a north-south stationary position, it turned east in a moment. He said the turning was hardly detectable to the eye. After the turn, it took off at a fantastic speed going east. From the time of takeoff until it vanished was a matter of moments. By the way, if you're interested, I put the citation of the actual file in the Canadian Archives. Again, you could go there yourself and take a look. So it's a very interesting case, and other than the color, I mean, he described this as a kind of grayish, a dull gray color without any kind of significant reflection or shine from it. Other than that, it was, I could say, almost identical to the Tic Tac. He did not notice any protrusions on it. So there's that difference. Interesting case, though. Very, very close in my view. Now, there's another case I'm going to talk about, which a lot of UFO researchers are well familiar with. And you wouldn't ordinarily think of this as a Tic Tac, but there's a reason I want to include this. And this is the 1948 Charles Whitted Eastern Airlines sighting. Again, UFO geeks know this one, all the nerds. This was a major sighting at the time, and I will show you an image, which I think this is a pretty good image, except the windows should be double-rowed windows. Very strange. So you have a moonless night, July 1948, two men piloting a DC-3 over Alabama, Captain Clarence Childs and his first officer, John Whitted. They see this brilliant, fast approaching object. It comes from below the horizon. It was blazing, very fast, cigar-shaped. That's how they described it. They didn't use the word Tic Tac. About 100 feet long and maybe about 30 feet wide. And it had this orange flame behind it, nearly 50 feet long. It was very, very fast. It had a fiery appearance. No contrails, though, but had this appearance, and it made no sound. And it veered upward, and it very narrowly missed their aircraft. And as it crossed in front of them, they both said they clearly saw a smooth metallic fuselage, no wings, no fins, just two rows of square windows that gave off a soft orange glow. And now here's the one thing. If you see at the very front of the craft, and my image is almost blocking it, but not quite. Childs noted a short boom-like protrusion from the nose, possibly like an antenna. Is that what this thing was? Or some kind of transmitter? Don't really know. Whitted did not see it. Childs did see it. But you could see why someone would miss it. I mean, this thing's moving very fast. And then it just pulled in with steep climb and vanished into the clouds above them. So the whole thing lasted, I think, about 10 or 15 seconds. Left a very strong impression on them, obviously. So I included this because it's got the windows, which are kind of a weird thing. Like, are there passengers in this? Like, you really wouldn't think so. Look out the window, get a good view of southern Alabama or northern Alabama. Don't think that's what that's for. But the boom in the front is some kind of an appendage. And I don't think anyone has any idea If that's man-made, I have no idea who built that. I don't think anybody does. By the way, that case got the attention of the United States Air Force in a big way, and it led to a famous document called the Estimate of the Situation, which essentially concluded that UFOs were real and they appeared to be extraterrestrial. So that sighting was actually quite significant. Through the 1950s and 60s, you have many reports of cigar-shaped UFOs. No one said Tic Tac. Biggest problem, again, in getting clear descriptions of these craft is that they're often only described as cigar shaped, so we don't usually get exact dimensions, unfortunately. Keep in mind, these are usually ground witnesses looking up at the sky. It's probably not easy. But in any case, we don't get many exact dimensions. Some of the UFOs in those years were described as egg-shaped. Famously, the Lonnie Zamora case of 1964, another one in France in Valençol in 1965. Egg-shaped, very similar to Tic Tac, but not exactly the same. There are others. And again, that's the thing. We have many variations of this basic shape. So let's move ahead. And there's one more that has windows. This is another one that's weaker than the others, but not necessarily terrible. This was a case of, let me go. So the next case I'm going to discuss took place in 1965. This is a maritime case, a Norwegian oil tanker, July 6, 1965. They're called the TT Javesta. I think that's how you pronounce it. It was through open waters on the Atlantic, out in the middle of the ocean. The crew members see an extraordinary object approach their ship. We have all the names of everyone involved here. It was a seaman. He was the first one, named Hernandez Ambrosio. He believed it came from the ocean before it changed direction and started to head toward him. We don't know for a fact that it came out of the ocean, but he is the one witness who said that's what it looked like. It looked like it came from out of the ocean. Here's an illustration of it. It's not entirely exact. It's close. It's close enough. The chief mate of the ship was named Torgrim Lean. He soon comes up on the deck and he sees this. He's very, very detailed. He's looking at it. He describes it as a massive cigar-shaped craft flying low under the clouds, totally silent. It's got square windows, again, glowing orange. No wings, no rudders, and this bluish kind of flame or something coming from the rear of the craft. The blue lights on the bottom, I think, probably don't belong there. There should be more blue lights behind it. Anyway, it passed directly over the ship, low, maybe as low as 200 meters, 300 meters altitude. And everyone apparently was just amazed at watching its velocity and its size. It was very fast, very large. He later just said with certainty, he said this was not an aircraft, this is not a rocket, this is not any kind of natural phenomenon. This was reported to Norwegian authorities. It was very well documented, written up in newspapers and described quite a bit. So those two with what looked like windows, you could argue those are not quite a Tic Tac design, probably so, although they're close in my view. The ones that follow, I think, are generally going to be better. Here's another maritime case from 1967. This is an Argentine merchant ship called the Naviero. And this is traveling along the South American coast north toward Buenos Aires. It's about 120 miles off the coast of Santa Catarina, Brazil. It's just past the continental shelf. When the captain of the ship, his name was Julian Ardanza, and his first officer, Julio Montoya, they see a luminous object just below the ocean surface. And this, I think, is a pretty good rendition of what they saw. It was like a glowing Havana cigar, about 110 feet long, gave off a kind of bluish white light, and it's just pacing the ship 50 feet away. It's really close. It had absolutely no visible features. There's no periscope, no tower, no other structures that you would see with a submarine. It produced no wake and no noise. And for 15 minutes, this thing it's following them. It dives beneath the ship, passes under it. and it finally just vanished at an estimated speed of about 25 knots, which was faster than the ship's cruising speed. And there was a glow that remained in the water for some time after. The captain was asked about all the other possibilities. Was it a submarine? Was it a whale? He's like, absolutely no, not a submarine, not a whale. There's no sea creature or submersible that could match the size or speed or the luminosity of this object. So this is a very good case. And again, this did get a lot of attention at the time. So I've got some others that I think are even closer Tic Tac descriptions. This one takes place in Norway at a place called the Sonja Fjord. This is in western Norway, and this went over a period of about 10 days in November of 1972, from November 12th to November 22nd. Again, I think this is very likely what this object looked like. So through a big part of November, you have this unidentified object. It was explicitly described as cylindrical or submarine-like object. This triggered a 10-day military operation in this fjord. It's a very deep fjord, by the way. Witnesses said it was very fast, had no visible means of propulsion. It was able to travel underwater at speeds that no submarine could match. There were also reports, in addition to this, of like weird lights and other strange aerial phenomena as well in the area. So it wasn't just an isolated water-based object that looked like a Tic Tac. Anyway, explosives were dropped down there. A missile was deployed against this thing. Nothing, the object evaded capture the whole time. Electronic systems failed on aircraft and naval vessels when they got near this. No wreckage was ever recovered. So you have all these Cold War suspicions, like, is this the Soviets? There is actually no, to this day, it's more than 50 years later, we have no evidence whatsoever that this was a Soviet submarine. There's no reason to think that this was a Soviet sub. There were incursions. The Soviets and the U.S. played all kinds of shenanigans in the waters, in the Baltic and in the northern seas there, but this one doesn't look like it. This was well beyond conventional submarine capabilities of the time. The next one I think is, now we're getting into the last three, which I think are quite definite Tic Tacs, I would say. This one I think is probably not known at all. I found this one in the course of my USO research. This will appear in my second volume of USO history. This took place at Saranac Lake in New York State on December 29th, 1972. I will set the scene and then show you an image here. So we're talking a very cold December evening, 1972. A woman is walking home from work along the, you've got a number of lakes that comprise Saranac Lake in that area, and I wasn't sure which exact one it was, but it was along the southern shore, probably lower Saranac Lake, is what I think. And so this is what happens. So the sun had just set, but there was still a lot of light coming from the moon and reflecting off the snow and ice. So it was very easy to see. So she's making her way along the shoreline, and she hears this like a low, muffled rumbling coming from beneath the ice. And then moments later, she's astonished. This thick lake of ice cracks open very violently, and this shiny metallic craft, it's just described exactly as you see here. It's a featureless silver kind of submarine. It comes out vertically from the water. She did see what looked like a row of windows. That was the only marking on this object that she could see. She estimated it was about 25 feet long and 8 to 10 feet tall. So actually maybe not even as elongated as what's indicated here. Maybe a little more capsule-like. This case was investigated. I don't have her name, but we have the name of an investigator who looked into it. His name was John Lutz. He described her as highly credible. And she said that after it breached through the surface, it just launched straight into the sky at tremendous speed, entirely silent as well. The only sound you could hear was the ice breaking. Otherwise, it made no noise. So It was a single witness event, so that's unfortunate, but still she had a lot of clarity and detail in her observation, as well as the physical disturbance to the ice, which Lutz, the investigator, was able to confirm. So gives you something to go on here. I think very much like a Tic Tac is what this seems like in 1972. Now, this next one that I'm going to show you is 1973, and this is also going to be in my next published book of USO history. This takes place off the northern coast of Venezuela, so in the lower portion of the Caribbean Sea there. This is during a very intense period of UFO and USO activity that many people were witnessing. This one I'm about to show you is from a married couple. They explicitly described a craft which they described as capsule-like, so very much like a Tic Tac. And I think this illustration is probably close. So this is during March and April of 1973, a big wave near the towns of La Guaira and Carayaca. Sorry, I'm mispronouncing that. This took place on the night of March 28th into the 29th, 1973. You have Armando Silva and his wife. We do not have her name. They lived in Carayaca, right on the coast. And it's 1 a.m. and they're both woken by an intense wave of heat. So Mrs. Silva goes out onto their balcony and she sees these two bluish capsule-like craft. They're hovering above the sea, and they approach the shoreline. And as they approach the shoreline, it becomes much, much brighter. So bright, she actually said it was almost as bright as the sun. So one of the objects drops into the water briefly, and then it resurfaces again. And then the second craft followed the same type of motion. This goes on for about 15 minutes. She's watching the two craft float together near the coast, and then they both rose into the sky and vanished, and they're gone. And once they left, then all the oppressive heat dissipated and the couple was able to sleep again. So meanwhile, during that, the husband, Armando Silva, goes outside to get a closer look. So she's watching from the balcony. He actually got to the shoreline where one of the craft had just come down a few meters, apparently, from the beach. And he sees through the craft had like a small window, which is kind of depicted here. And he claimed that he saw a small humanoid type of figure. He said it was like the size of a 5-year-old child wearing what he described as a kind of a helmet. And he just got terrified. So Silva ran back to the house. So yeah, it's his testimony and her testimony. It is what it is. It was during a wave of UFO and USO sightings that were being recorded along that whole area of Venezuela. So you've got that. And that will take me to the final Tic Tac-like case, another one that I think may well be exact. Everything from the description gives me reason to think so. This is from a teenage boy at a lake in South Carolina in 1981. I think this image is probably very, very close to what Carl Moore saw. He was a 14-year-old boy. This is July 15th, 1981. So he was alone. He was at a boat ramp at a small lake outside Newberry, South Carolina. It's a very calm night, very clear summer evening, and moments earlier, he and his friends had gone to sleep after a long, he said, mostly unsuccessful day of fishing. He goes back out to check his trout lines. It's about 10:30 p.m., and he sees this glowing silver-white object. It's moving over the water surface. It's about 30 feet long, cigar-shaped. It's giving off small, little whitish blue lights that flicker on and off. And it's very slow. It's moving maybe 20, 25 miles per hour, and then it descends very gently and lands on the lake. And that's when he gets a sudden burst of steam that he sees coming out from the lake. It stays on the surface for about 3 minutes. Carl is watching this. He is 50 feet away. He is frozen in awe at watching this thing. And then it just rises slightly, hovers about a foot above the water, and then in a flash, it just accelerates vertically with incredible speed. It's gone, instantly gone, totally silent. He reported this to a local UFO investigative group, and despite knowing that other people were likely to dismiss this because of it just seemed too crazy to be true, but that's what he reported. So we cannot say that Tic Tac style craft were ever common, but they were not unique to 2004 either, not by a long shot. The 1936 Almer case, Lake Almer, that's a Tic Tac. I think so is the object that was seen coming out of lower Saranac Lake in 1972. The Venezuelan coast sightings and the South Carolina case, I think they're all very similar. And even some of the other ones, the earlier ones, a little borderline, but they're relevant. And I'm sure there are others that didn't make it into this video that I just didn't know about. So it raises a simple but important point. If the 2004 Tic Tac is man-made, then when did we start making them? Because that changes the whole conversation here. You can't just pick an arbitrary date and then declare everything before that is alien, everything after that is ours. If we're claiming this is Lockheed or some other black project, fine, but then someone has got to start showing the physics, the energy systems, the command chain, because there are real problems with that explanation. Again, those little tiny appendages that Chad Underwood described. Some people like to take that as proof that it's human built. Why? Because they seem less exotic? Because they're not smooth enough? It's kind of a weird assumption. If you believe this craft can cancel inertia or traverse air and sea without resistance and move in ways that break our current understanding of motion, then the presence of a couple of antenna-like protrusions shouldn't suddenly make you think, oh, it's ours. If anything, it just deepens the mystery. And if you're going to call it human-made, then I think it would be nice to have someone explain how those components fit into a system that we're not supposed to have to begin with. But which really leads me to the biggest red flag of all. The Tic Tac arrived at the Navy's Combat Air Patrol, that's the cap point, before the jets did. That location was encrypted. That location was shared only via classified military comms between aircraft and ships. So how did it get there? If it was man-made, you've got really one of three possibilities, as it seems to me. One, the program had real-time access to encrypted U.S. comms, which would suggest some kind of insider control. Okay. Two, a foreign nation, some foreign actor cracked U.S. encryption. That would be an intelligence catastrophe, and there's no evidence that anyone has uncovered that indicates that. Or third, the object had some form of non-local intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, so some kind of quantum level awareness of U.S. military planes in some way. None of those explanations are all that satisfying, frankly. All of them point to something extraordinary. And if this was a U.S. test, you've got to ask, who authorized it? Who risked spoofing Navy pilots during active operations? And why hasn't a single person come forward with any sort of information of schematics or materials, or even deeply classified special access programs can leave behind budget footprints or whistleblower chatter or some kind of technical lineage. But here we have nothing. So I would like to ask the obvious. Where is the evidence that we made this thing? If it is man-made, why has no one ever explained how it works? Why are we still waving our hands and saying Lockheed without demanding any specifics? If someone has leaked that it was ours, why hasn't anyone leaked any outlines of the technology itself? The answer always is like, just trust us, it's magic. And that's not good enough. If someone wants to argue that Americans have been making these things since the 1930s or 1940s, then they have a lot of explaining to do, because that means thousands of UFO encounters over the last 80 plus years were just one part of a secret domestic test program, and somehow not a shred of any concrete evidence has ever leaked out toward that. That stretches belief past the breaking point. So I'm not saying it's impossible that this is man-made, but I am saying if you're going to make that claim, you better show your work. And I just don't see it. There's a lot of important questions to be asked here. Well, we are surely in an interesting time. I hope you're sufficiently buckled up because we're already on a bumpy ride. That's all I have for you today. If you like this video, please hit the like button, click on notifications, share the video. Also visit my website at richarddolanmembers.com. I will be back again. In the meantime, keep fighting the good fight. Later.